So today we begin a 5-week sermon series that was inspired by you. In fact, not all of you, but one of you, who came up to me on Epiphany Sunday, I think it was, as I preached on the wise men. I talked a lot about wisdom, and you said, Pastor, I've never heard a sermon on Proverbs. And I thought to myself, neither have I. And so this week I found myself in Mendocino, California with 3 pastor-preacher colleagues of mine, and we worked together to bring Dr. Tom Long, who's one of the best preachers in America, to do a preaching workshop with us. And I asked Tom, I said, Tom, how many sermons have you done on Proverbs? He said, 1. In 50 years. You're going to get 5 sermons on the Book of Proverbs over the next 5 weeks. How exciting. And let me say that these will be different kinds of sermons, because Proverbs doesn't always hold together. We have to kind of pick some different Proverbs and hopefully find some collective whole in the midst of them. But they are at best a collection of wisdom and advice that's been passed on to us by ancient mothers and fathers, mostly fathers, unfortunately. But wisdom imparted to us, to the next generation, by our elders. Truths about God, truths about daily life. In the upcoming series, we'll look at work, friendship, money, and character. And today, we're going to look at family. Today's sermon is Ancient Wisdom for Modern Families. Now, as we begin, it's important to open up this context a bit, because modern families continue to take on different shapes and forms. Today we have same-sex families. We have blended families. We have single-parent families. We have dual-income families. We have families who choose not to have children. We have families who choose to adopt children. We have families whose parents have divorced but still try to work together to raise kids. Many things about families change and evolve and continue to do so. But wisdom is those things that don't change. Wisdom is wisdom. Hopefully, what we lift out here are timeless truths that fit in all the contexts that we understand family today. Because things change, and they must change, and they will change whether we like it or not. But what doesn't change is wisdom. So today's sermon about families are going to focus on 4 things: discipline, family meals, fidelity, and praise. So let's take those one at a time. First, discipline. A wise child loves discipline, but a scoffer or a misbehaving child does not listen to rebuke. A wise child loves discipline. That's a strong word. Do you love discipline? Do you love to be criticized? Do you love to be critiqued? Do you love to receive feedback, negative feedback? Do you love discipline? I suspect most of us, when we receive any kind of discipline, the first thing we do is we resist it. We push it away. We turn our back, or we try to live our lives so nobody will ever say anything harsh about us. We don't like it, most of us, let alone love it. But one of the signs of maturity is being able to look back on our lives, and it helps when we're a little bit older, but to look back and realize that the people who told us everything we wanted to hear, the people who made sure that we were always feeling good, the people who placated us and tried to meet our every needs, did not love us as well as the people who said hard things with love and tried to discipline us and show us what was right and what was wrong. As we mature, we begin to realize that the coaches and the parents and the pastors who disciplined us had our best intentions at heart oftentimes. And we grow in gratitude as we get older for the people sometimes who were toughest with us. Sometimes when we have children ourselves, we begin to realize the importance of discipline. We do, by trial and error, discover that kids tend to do a little bit better when they know the rules than when they don't. Or maybe we look around at other people's kids and we begin to say, wow, that kid's really misbehaved. And then we meet their parents and it kind of makes sense. I understand why they misbehave. Either way, I think as we mature, we begin to see discipline in a new way. We begin to realize its importance. I remember learning a lot about discipline in North Philadelphia. I was working as a therapist for 2 years with a school for adolescent kids who had behavior disorders and who lived in the projects of North Philly. Now, most of these kids had a parent, usually one, and that parent was often addicted to crack cocaine. And so they were being raised by their peers or by the apartment people, and it was a really horrifying way to grow up. And I would watch this one guy who was a colleague of mine, a therapist. He was a Rastafarian, and he was amazing with these teenagers. They respected him in ways they didn't respect others. And so one day I asked him, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "It's really simple, Mark. When I meet with them, I say, here's the circle. Here are the boundaries in our relationship. You have all the freedom you want within this circle. And when you step out of it, there's going to be a consequence." And the key, he said, was just to give the consequence. Don't gloat about it. Don't try to make them understand. Just continue to reinforce the consequence. Because in the end, it's their choice whether to listen or not to. And he was amazingly effective with these kids because they understood the boundaries and they understood the consequences. And they found within them the desire to do the right thing, at least in that context. And that's how he got through to them. Because he knew something that we are all called to know, that we need discipline in our lives. All of us do. We need it the way a plant needs water in order for us to grow strong and healthy and to become fruitful human beings. We need discipline. And genuine love includes gentle yet firm discipline. Because discipline demonstrates something important to our children. We love you. Your behavior matters, and we care about the kind of person you're becoming. Discipline is a healthy and important ingredient for a healthy family. Which leads to the second point, family meals. Better is a dinner of vegetables with love than a fatted ox with hatred in it. Now, I admit this proverb loses some of its punch if you're a vegan or a vegetarian. I get that. But I think most of us still prefer meat to vegetables. But if not, you can change the language. Today, I think it might be better to say better is a lousy dinner around a dinner table than a gourmet meal in front of the television. Because family meals aren't ultimately about the food as much as they are about connection. They're about seeing each other. They're about being seen. They're about nurturing the connectivity within the family. It's about honoring that connection, strengthening it. It's about checking in with each other and speaking what's going on in our lives and listening to what's going on in others' lives. In our family, this has been a central practice that we have done for 15 years. And it's challenging, especially with sports and homework and evening meetings. It is hard with life pulling us in 1,000 different directions. And it isn't always well received and increasingly not well received as our kids get older. There's a lot of pushback around family meals. And sometimes the best we can do is carve out 5 minutes. And we've even resorted to setting the timer for 5 minutes. But I tell you, those 5 minutes are important. That may be the only time that we're together, intact, as a family, seeing each other, listening to each other, being together. What's interesting is the research that's coming out to support this. It's confirmed, I think, what many elders have known for generations, but a family meal, a regular family meal, is good for our health. It's linked to lower rates of substance abuse, teen pregnancy, and depression. It's linked to higher grade point averages and higher self-esteem. And with our younger children, it boosts vocabulary. And with our older teens, it builds resilience. These are interesting discoveries. Can you think of anything else in family life that packs that kind of punch as sitting together as a family? Which leads to the third ingredient, fidelity. The church has spent so many years and so much energy arguing about who can and cannot be married. Imagine if we channeled that time and that energy towards encouraging people to remain faithful in their marriage. Imagine if we used that time and energy to equip people, to prepare them, to support them in their marriage. Imagine if we used the pulpit to challenge people to honor the marital vows. How much better would that have served humanity than all the arguments that miss the point? In all the battles about marriage, we've missed the point about that which is most important. The proverb says, rejoice in the wife of your youth. Or you could say, rejoice in the husband of your youth. Many of us made the commitment to marry before we had any idea what it meant. We didn't go in with the best intentions. Probably we had all kinds of alternative agendas. And yet the commitment is the same. To live faithfully together in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health. And we are called to remember those vows, to honor them. And part of living faithfully together is enjoying each other. Giving and receiving pleasure is important in honoring the commitments that we make. It's an important ingredient to nurturing those bonds and strengthening those vows that we do together. Rejoice in the wife of your youth is not rejoice in your young wife. Rejoice in the husband of your youth is not rejoice in your young husband. Rejoice in the person who, yes, is aging just like you. Enjoy them. Give pleasure to them. Receive pleasure from them. Why would you look for that outside the marriage? It is meant to be discovered within the marriage. Do not look to an adulteress or an adulterer. The Father is teaching something really important, that pleasure in the context of a lifelong commitment is a good and holy and sacred and beautiful thing. He is saying that this passion that we all have is beautiful and good in the context of marriage, but can be cruel and destructive outside that context. It is a good master, or a bad master, and a good servant of something bigger. Something that isn't always apparent in today's culture. One of the questions I ask young people coming to get married, I do a lot of premarital counseling, and I'll ask them, are you living together? It's a test to see if they're honest. No, increasingly people are living together. And you know, I guess there's some wisdom, I guess, to that. But what I say to them, they don't often want to hear. When they tell me, yes, we've been living together, I say, you know, you've been living in probably the most insecure arrangement you could have created. Because commitment involves vow. A vow to stay together in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow and sickness and health. And when you are living together without that commitment, there's no stopping the one person from saying, you know what, I'm done, and stepping away. And in that context, why would you ever share your real self with somebody else? You're actually holding back whether you realize it or not. And it is the vows that we make that open the door for us to be really vulnerable with each other, to share our true self. And without that vulnerability, intimacy cannot happen. And so I say, you've been living in the most insecure time in your relationship. James Baldwin said every marriage needs furniture in it. I think the point he was making is it's harder to break up when you got a lot of furniture around, right? It's harder to step away when you've made that vow, when you have that legal commitment that you've made. And in that context, intimacy can thrive and flourish as it has for so many for so long. Fidelity may not be the popular thing to talk about today, but it is a necessary ingredient to healthy families. Which leads to the final point, praise. Proverbs 31, I hope you go on to read it, it's actually been used as a job description for women for all time. Some preachers will keep pressing away at that issue, saying that here it is in the Bible, women must get married, they must have children, they must take up the loom. But it's not a job description for all time. It was the author's attempt to praise an upper-class Jewish woman for all that she did. This woman kept her household functioning day and night, buying, trading, investing, planting, sewing, spindling, managing servants, extending charity, providing food for the family, and preparing for each season. The late Rachel Held Evans says, this is not a once-and-for-all command to women, but an ode to women. It's not an ideal job description. It's not a checklist for the faithful woman to check off in order to win praise from her husband. It was the men, not the women, who were supposed to memorize this text. Presumably because we men need help recognizing the value of the women in our lives. Jewish men were taught as good Jews to sing Proverbs 31 as a song of praise to the women in their lives. They were taught to sing it to their wives, their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, and friends. At every Sabbath gathering, they were to celebrate and praise the women. More generally, I think it reminds us of the importance of praise, of recognizing the everyday mundane task that our partner does. Imagine if you came home every day and you said to your spouse, thank you for picking up the groceries. Thank you for making dinner. Thank you for cleaning the toilets. Thank you for washing the clothes. Or imagine you came home and you thanked your spouse for making the money necessary to buy the groceries and to buy the cleaning supplies and to buy the appliances that you use every single day. Imagine if we truly recognized the contributions our partner makes to the health and the management of family life. And imagine if we didn't just recognize it, but we said it every day. I'm so bad at this. But imagine if we all committed to just speaking more words of praise to our partner. Sadly, we live at a time in our modern world where ancient wisdom is quickly written off as irrelevant or out of touch. And some of that is well deserved. But things like wisdom never change. They're timeless. And we can argue about the best way to discipline a child, and I think that's a very good argument to have. But let's not argue about the importance of discipline. It is so crystal clear it is important. We can argue about the best type of family meals to have, and that's a good argument. But let's not argue about the importance of sharing a meal regularly together as a family. We can argue about marriage as we are, but let's not argue about the importance of fidelity. And let's not keep people from being able to make that vow to each other. We can argue about what it means to be a man or a woman, or a husband or a wife, but let's not argue about the importance of praising our partner and seeing the everyday mundane things he or she does to bless our lives. And let us continue to listen to our elders, to take seriously what they have discovered is a healthy and important ingredient to a family. And let us find ways of becoming those elders ourselves, to imparting the wisdom that has been imparted to us so the family can return to its most important role, which is the place where character is formed and where our children are trained to be healthy, joyful, humble, and helpful human beings. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for the families that have shaped us, for the lessons that we learned, for the people who loved us enough to discipline us. Help us, Lord, to do what is necessary to strengthen our families, and help us to do what is best for our children. To not only praise them and tell them what they want to hear, but to also correct them and give them a vision for what it looks like to be a better human being. Help us, Lord, to love with gentleness and firmness. And help us to remember the importance of being together. Through plenty and in want, through joy and sorrow, through sickness and health. Amen.